yes. Welcome back to Small Bean Services program, Directorpiece Theater. Here's two men to talk about a film. I need to sit down, I'm drunk.
Well, welcome everyone to the second episode of Directorpiece Theater, where your favorite former crack directors get together and talk about your favorite movies and talk about why they're so well made or not. I am one of your hosts, Adam Ganser. With me is my co-host.
I'm Abe. I'm Abe Epperson. I'm a co-host.
I never tire of your cheerfulness when you introduce yourself.
Although it's funny you say your favorite. Not that that's even true.
Sure.
Favorite ex-cracked directors. But we were, for a long time...
That's a small pool, by the way. That's a pretty small pool.
For a long time, the only.
Right, exactly. That's a pretty small pool. It didn't feel like it was a really risky take to call us that. Yeah.
We hedge our bets in our confidence. That's, yeah. Let's not inflate our egos too much because there's no other way it can be. So.
Yes, I limit the ways that love can come to me, so I'll be sure to get it.
Very humbling. Very humbling.
Yeah, very much so.
So what are we doing today, and what's the point of this? Like, why did you call me?
With the recorder on and the mic set and everything. I thought I'd just hang out. No, but
chill.
for oh, great.
Word.
But for real, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about one of my favorite movies, and I think one of yours also, Ocean's 11.
Yeah.
I know that you... How many times did you say you've seen Ocean's 11?
I've seen Ocean's 11 a lot. More than I'd like to admit on a microphone.
Fair enough. Go ahead.
It's just delightful to watch, even though it's like stupid. It's like one of those stupid I love it movies.
It really is stupid. I agree with you on that take. And yet, like Shawshank Redemption, if it's on, you're watching 20, 30 minutes of it, right? Like if it's on TV or whatever, you're watching it, right?
Yeah. I don't know if I agree with Shawshank as the next example you give as a stupid it's fun movie, but
no. Don't you think it's fun when he walks through that sewer and
yeah
when he releases all that dirt for years from his pants? No, I'm what I mean by that is that I think it's one of the kinds of movies that like everybody loves enough that if it's on, you'll watch it for a little while. You're instinctively like, oh yeah, I love that movie. I want to catch a little bit of it.
Yeah. You know? Because I feel like it's always kind of in medias res, to use the term. Like it's always, it feels like it's always going on. One thing leads to another. It's very nebulous, its form. So it's like I can chime in at any time and I don't feel like I'm missing anything because I'm always occupied. It's always telling me a new thing. I like that about that movie.
You have perfectly described exactly what I want to say about Ocean's 11. So Okay, so here's my theory on this movie. Ocean's 11 is one of the first times we've ever seen in movies when a heist movie became less about the tension of the heist and more about just expositing the fun of the plan. This is a movie that made exposition the point. And also exposition fun, and that's all it did, which is never happens in movies. Like legit never happens.
From a screenwriting standpoint, a bad idea.
Right, exactly. And like I think that because it was so successful and we've copied it so many times and there's been so many sequels, we kind of forget that it has all the ingredients of a bad movie. Like literally all the ingredients. So for instance, it has so many stars in it that we have to give each of them an appropriate amount of screen time and a little plot in order for us to care, right? Which is usually a recipe already for a movie not to work, right? It's a remake of a movie that was also already successful with famous people. That's usually a problem. And it was a payday for a director who had already won a bunch of awards.
Yeah, so he won Traffic before this, right?
Like the year before. He just won a Best Director Oscar, and he was up for Traffic and Aaron Brockovich the same year and won for Traffic. And it's like exactly the kind of project that normally a director, by the way, this is Steven Soderbergh, would take off, right? So there's every reason why it should be bad. Like, and that's not even talking about the plot of it. The plot of it is they're going to rob 3 casinos in Las Vegas, and they're going to do it in a way where you don't understand exactly how the heist works. And that's like the premise of it.
Or how casinos work. Because, I mean, like, why do they have one vault for 3 casinos? I don't know.
Completely baffling. Why would that ever exist? And
so does
where
that mean
would it
they
exist?
have to go outside the casino to bring it to another vault? That feels unsafe to me.
That's... God, it's like so easy to poke holes in the premise of this movie.
Right.
And, as you should. Why is there one vault is a wonderful question. And like, if you're those other hotels, like let's say you're the Wynn, you know, or what was the one that you and I stayed at? Was it the Mirage?
It was well, we stayed at the Mirage. We did go into the Wynn, and we felt immediately like
we didn't deserve to be there.
Boy, we don't deserve to be here.
I have dirt on my face. I do not deserve to be in this hotel.
I have not a single handkerchief.
I left all my pocket squares back in the
I do not have a
back in my
pocket
bag.
square.
Right. It's definitely too fancy. So, but for real though, if you're building a hotel and you know that vault exists, why aren't you like, hey, can we get in on that? We'll like split the cost with you. You know what I mean? So why is it just 3 of the 7 or 8 hotels on the Strip? I don't get that.
I mean, they explain it. I mean, they say like they're his casinos, Benedict.
So does that mean he built this thing? Like, and I'm not trying to ruin this whole thing before I get into the theory, but just like brief observation. Does that mean he built this vault underground after he purchased 3 of the biggest casinos in the world?
Yes.
That's
I'm gonna go with yes.
It has to mean that, right? That's insane. Right.
I don't know.
But so this is a really good example of like, this is a movie that if you stop and think about it for 1 second, it falls apart. And yet it's one of the most successfully entertaining movies that's too convoluted to be a tense movie any of us have ever seen. Right? It's to repeat my theory again, it's one of the only times that I've ever seen in a movie where the exposition of it was the point. And that is stunning. You know, that's a stunning thing.
No, it's a delight. Like I said, I've watched it many times.
Well, that's the proof, right? Like nobody here is going to say, like,
exactly.
it's like one of the best movies ever made, but like it's one of the best heist movies ever made, right? It has to be.
It's up there. It's got all the component parts you want from a heist movie.
And I would argue it's actually sort of like an anti-heist movie because the heist part of it, even though that's what we're watching, is never tense. Every other heist movie you can think of, it's always like, oh my God, are they going to get away with this? And that's not what happens in Ocean's 11. What happens in Ocean's 11 is, how are they going to get away with this? This will be fun to see.
The music's always like, bounce, 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 or it's like, you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's like, it's always like, all right, we're having fun.
Right. And the music never suggests that any of this is going to be a problem. Like at any point in time. So like, because they took the heist out of it, what they did instead is like, hey, we're going to create the feeling of just hang back and watch this. It's just fun. That's all it is. Right. And everything about it is a wink to the camera. And we all kind of agreed to that. And now that's the formula for heist movies.
Okay.
So that's really interesting, right? So the question is, how did they get us to stop asking like the heist movie questions as an audience member, right?
I'll take it from here. Unholy spells, incantations, probably involving ghouls, right?
Yeah,
because they're
sorcery is always at the back
sorcerers.
Sorcery is always at the back of any mystifying film question. Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah,
we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Explain to me, how does Ocean's 11 turn you into a little dummy who just enjoys the movie?
Okay, so there's a combination of screenwriting tricks and filmmaking tricks that the movie uses to kind of force us to no longer think about the plot and instead to think about how much fun we're having with the characters and kind of release our grip on wanting there to be tension. Okay, so the first thing is, and it's probably the most important, is that Soderbergh is a master of motion. And by that, I mean he can use literally any camera trick in the book to make a scene feel like it's progressing. And he does this in like this very subconscious way where, because the thing is always in motion, we feel like, oh, we're making progress. It's going somewhere. So we don't ask the question like, should this be happening? Does this make any sense? We don't ask those questions because camera forces us to feel like we're constantly on the go. The movie is constantly unfolding.
So it does it by camera.
That's one of the tactics,
elements.
And just to be like a little technical about it, he uses every single film trick that I have seen that's not lighting related, but that's motion related. So like he uses handheld camera, he uses Steadicam, he uses dollies, he uses zooms, he uses helicopter shots, strobing
security
effects,
camera footage, right?
Yeah, he strobes. Yeah. He does focus blurs. It's almost as complicated as a Spike Lee movie. Right, and Spike Lee is sort of infamous for using every single camera trick you can imagine. Soderbergh is doing exactly that, and yet none of the movements ever feel out of place. And some of them are really crazy. Like, for instance, we meet Matt Damon's character, Linus, right? It's about the 26th minute of the movie. And the first time we see him, where he's on a subway, right? And for no reason, the camera is strobing. And by that, I mean, like, we have this strange blurring effect between frames where like reality is sort of changed and heightened, and it's the only scene in the movie where we have that effect.
So you don't mean strobing as in like a strobe lighting effect. You mean strobing as in slow shutter speed.
Correct. That's yes.
Like
thank
the
you for
opposite of
that.
Gladiator, where
Yes.
when in Gladiator, Ridley Scott, Russell Crowe would thrust his sword into the sand, and you'd see these granular sand molecules, and it would all, like we've used it. That's fast shutter speed because it keeps the apertures opening and closing so quickly that you get a super clear picture.
Yes.
Now, if you were to slow down
heightened.
the shutter speed, that covers up the film gate. It allows for a blur in between, like in the negative space, so to speak. And when the frame is off, it has to get the same amount of light by opening up slowly. So more light is getting in, so all the motion is blurred together, and you get that strobe effect.
I'm pretty sure he's doing it in camera, although there's a moment later on where George Clooney rips off Matt Damon's, like he does a lift from Matt Damon's pocket, that the effect resumes that might have been done in post. But I'm pretty sure the first scene is exactly what you're describing, right? The one with Linus, where he's robbing that guy from
he's
his...
like bumping against, other subway or
Now there's like
patrons.
there are obvious reasons why you would use this effect for specifically that kind of theft. Like, it looks really fake to watch a person do a lift in real time when he robs a guy from his suit jacket, like his front pocket. Whereas with the strobing effect, the motion is so blurred that it feels like it could have happened in a way that felt secret and you don't think about it. Right. So it has that advantage.
I've seen the effect done, like Guy Ritchie has used it in Snatch and Wong Kar-wai in Chungking Express to give the feeling that you're like drunk or a night is a blur. But this is the first time I've seen it just to introduce a character to be like...
A lot of, yes, exactly. It's a character introduction tactic, which is really weird because, like, it's the only character introduction that has this, and it makes you feel like the guy is sort of perennially nervous, like there's a sort of nervous, uncertain quality to him, which later on becomes very important because basically Matt Damon is the only person who ever doubts the plan. Like, he's the only person who experiences the, oh, is this actually going to work feeling? No one else has that feeling. He's literally the only one that goes through a journey on the heist at all. So Soderbergh has to introduce his anxiety in a way that doesn't make him feel less cool, but that does kind of give us some sort of inner workings. But more important than that, it masks the fakeness of that lift, right? And it's the kind of tactic that, other than the two examples you used, you only saw them used in a sort of shitty way in like a 90s movie or something, or like an 80s movie when they ran out of cool camera things to do. It's not typically used in really cool movies, right? Would you agree to that?
I think Chungking Express is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's the one exception.
You put mamas and papas over, the leaves are brown. It's like fucking that. To use a word from last episode, that slaps.
Oh my! I knew you were gonna do it. I knew you were gonna bring that back.
I had to do it.
I like that.
I like the thing that I didn't think about is the training us. Like Linus is nervous and tense, like this feeling of uneasy, and the idea of putting it on a subway where people are jerking to and fro.
Yes.
Like nothing is stable, everything's off center and can be pushed over at any time.
That's correct. Okay, so just a couple more examples of motion here. So there's an amazing zoom in on some balloons in the back of Brad Pitt's car, which then of course we zoom out of the balloons and it's Casey Affleck and Scott Caan's characters like masking a camera with the balloons and getting into one of their 50 fights in the movie, all of which are very funny. But like a zoom in on balloons is so silly that like you kind of it gives you like a visceral smile. You're like, no, how, like, why would we ever do zoom in on balloons? Well, that's the kind of movie it is, right? Like, it's not serious. And I think it's one of those motion tricks where like, it's a really cool way to get in and out of a scene, right? We zoom in, lose our, like, it blurs out, and then we blur back in as we zoom out of the same balloons in a different place. But B, it sort of gives us a sort of whimsical, like, this movie, this is fun. Right? And it's like such an obvious example of that it kind of takes our...
So you're saying not necessarily like a rack focus inside the scene, but intra-scene, meaning scene
transition.
to scene,
Yes.
transitioning. Yeah, I get that feeling. Or I think what you're saying, is it that because it goes out of focus and it can hide the cut.
Yes.
Because it just becomes a wash of colors.
Correct.
And then when you rack back out, and it's a new place, you get the feeling that whoever is running like the show, which is Soderbergh, but like, you know, the narrator, when you're just watching the movie, you're in good hands. They're meticulously designing every being, so you're just along for the ride.
Correct.
Much in the same way that when you're like, when I went to Disneyland and there was that, I looked to the left and there was that shit, and then I looked to the right, there's that shit. I just felt like there's constantly shit happening, and wherever I looked, I was in good hands.
Right. And like, just to reinforce the obvious thing about this movie, this is 11 men trying to rob hundreds of millions of dollars from a casino, and we're like watching balloons wackily used to like conceal cameras and stuff, as though, for sure this is going to work. Like, this is the entirety of the plan for that part of it, is balloons.
Hey, sometimes a plan involves balloons, man. I just have balloons on retainer just in case I need them to hatch my plans.
I mean, your house is basically like a clown college. It's beautiful in there.
Because you never know when a balloon can really improve a podcast.
I also never know when that could happen.
We don't, but it will.
So
at one point.
Maybe I should dial my skepticism back a little bit, but it's such a wacky thing. I just feel like it deserves mentioning in this motion category. Okay, a couple more examples. One, so Matt Damon learns in about 30 minutes into the movie, about 30, maybe 40 minutes into the movie, he learns his job is to be like the shadow guy who learns everything about people, right? The tale. And that's how we learned about, Benedict, and how we learned about Danny's thing with Tess and everything else. But he learns it while they are like unloading like metal beams from a conveyor belt. Like, they're just whipping them at him, and he's like, so wait a minute, how am I going to do this? And like, he has to catch and manage these metal beams while he's learning this fact, which is a really good sort of like small microcosm of this movie. Like, they're dumping facts on us while we're trying to manage the actual emotional beats of the scene. And he doesn't have time to slow down and ask any questions about how to tail these people. He just has to keep unloading it, just like this conveyor belt, because of the motion of it. And the camera doesn't even linger on it long enough for us to be like, yeah, how is he going to do that? Instead, it whips over to Brad Pitt, who like winks and smiles and then whips another metal beam at us. And it's just such a good example of motion keeping us from asking questions or lingering on problems too long. Like, it's just like, nah, man.
Urgency to it.
Yeah, this whole movie is those metal beams whipping down this conveyor belt.
Yeah, it's just like, why am I doing this? Why are we doing this? I don't know. Because we need to get to the next scene, baby.
Right, exactly. This movie does not let you have enough time to have a question, which is like literally exactly the experience of the character of Linus, but also our experience as an audience, and that's like such a great little microcosm of it. Yeah, and so like the last thing I want to mention is this concept called the camera drop-off, right? And this is used in movies a lot, but it's used really well in this movie. And that is, so we're watching, we've watched a scene where some secret stuff has happened, right? And then we follow the person out of the scene, which is a thing that we're used to watching happen, right? A scene transition. And then the camera gets dropped off with another person who overheard the entire thing.
Like,
right?
you mean it literally, like, switches over to...
Yes.
Like, the point of view of
Yes.
the camera is now distracted to another character.
Correctly.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes, exactly. It's how we figure out how Matt Damon learns everything that he learns, although not just him. It's done with a lot of characters, but he is the most obvious. And there are times where the place where we land on Matt Damon, he couldn't have heard any of the things that happened at all. Like, he would never have been able to hear all of that. But because the camera has gone in such a dramatic, distinctive motion, we just like do the mental work of, he heard it. He heard the whole thing. It's a really great camera trick for he heard the entire thing, even though he couldn't have. It's not possible.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Camera forces us to agree.
You're going with this.
Yeah. And there's so much stuff like that. I just think it's really cool directing and also DPing. And the fun fact, Soderbergh was also the DP of this movie.
He does that a lot.
Yes. Yeah, he really knows the cinematic language, and this movie is him using basically every piece of it he wants to keep us from having time to object to what he's saying. And that's really interesting. Okay, so another way that he does it. He uses scene transitions that plant ideas and then pay them off later. So, like, the most famous one of them is that we discover the air freshener for the SWAT team. Like, this is like right as the heist is about to begin, a couple of guys are getting into a van, and we are zooming in on the van from inside the point of view of a different car that we don't see or understand. But then we rack focus to this air freshener, and it's like a thing where people are like, what is that air freshener? And then, like, it doesn't come back till the moment that the guys are loading the money into the SWAT vehicle, and you're like, oh, that was the thing that we're supposed to learn. And
even though it's not even the same air freshener or the same
Right.
van, because the van that had it was the van that was destroyed by the pinch, and the SWAT van is a completely different van.
I think it actually I think it actually is inside the SWAT van. We've just never seen the inside of the SWAT van.
Oh, okay.
That's the trick, right? That's the
So
that happens an
Soderbergh's-
hour in.
He's like so he's like a stage magician
Yes.
saying to look at this hand to hide the other, like some kind of wizard using unholy spells involving ghouls, probably.
Definitely, there's certainly something ghoulish going on. That's for sure.
What a ghoul!
Definitely. The pinch, by the way, can I spend a little time on the pinch? The pinch is...
Yeah, hit me with the pinch.
The
pinch me, baby.
The pinch is the most fucking ridiculous thing in this movie by a lot. So just for people who don't remember it, so there's a moment where Don Cheadle's character, who we're going to talk about a little bit later, comes in and he's just like, we got to get this EMP device in order to shut the city down for 30 seconds so you guys can get down the vault with all the lasers, right? Which is very silly. The pinch is like a gigantic, it looks like, I don't know, an hourglass with coils in it and stuff, and it's like probably weighs several thousand pounds, and like 8 of the guys go to get it. And that's just a thing that happens in this movie from like a school. And I mean, first of all, there's like some really smart decisions by Soderbergh there. One of them is we're about to go on the heist to get the pinch. And he's like, Matt Damon, your character has to stay in the car. So instead of going with the guys on the heist, which should have been a tense moment, we stay with Matt Damon in the car while he listens to the 2 brothers who are driving bicker the whole time. So we miss the heist. It's like instead of the heist, we have this weird joke, which is a thing we're going to come back to later. But it's the kind of thing every other movie would give you the pinch stealing scene. Ocean's 11 doesn't give it to you. Instead, it gives you some jokes, and then they come out with the pinch. And that's the entirety of that scene, other than Matt Damon makes a mistake.
And it gives you the time to give the plot or the character development of Linus is unhappy about his place in the
correct.
in like his role in the heist,
and he's
also
undependable.
Yen, who's the grease man,
right? The grease man,
who's going to do all the jumps and stuff, hurts his hand during that. Yeah, so that adds later tension for during the actual heist. It's a payoff later. So it's like weaving all these things, which is good plant payoff stuff. But yeah, it has. Avoiding doing the actual heist of the pinch isn't interesting in a heist movie. They avoided a heist.
Right. It's like that's exactly the scene in every other movie you would definitely want to watch. But this movie understood, hey, we're not gonna get bogged down with this stupid like EMP device. They're just gonna walk in and get it. And in order to justify that, we're gonna have some jokes.
Just like we didn't need to see a scene where they go and buy air fresheners.
Right, of course, exactly. So just to stay on the thread here, so a couple of other scene transitions that plant ideas that will need to pay off later. At the beginning of the scene where Danny and Rusty decide to recruit Matt Damon, and by that I mean it's the scene, you think we need one more? You think we need one more? All right, we'll get one more, right? They have like a bunch of those in this movie. That scene begins with a promo for the heavyweight boxing match that's going to happen later in this movie with, by the way, two very important actual boxers that they got to be in the movie, which is crazy. They have just like a tiny little promo for it, which sort of plants the idea, it needs to happen during the fight. That's how they got the idea to do it during the fight. Like, that's a cool, tiny little thing that you don't think about, but it subconsciously plants the idea, right? There's the scene where Rusty confronts Danny about Tess, where he's just like, tell me it's not about Tess. To get to that conversation, we pass through a bunch of guys putting together this mock vault, right? Which is, it's stated once in the movie, hey, we need to make a mock vault. But when you actually see them doing it, they're like putting chips and like actual details of the vault inside this mock vault. And if you thought about it, it's like, why the hell do you need that to practice? You don't need any of that shit to practice, right? It's like one of the only times that the actual resolution of the movie is put forward for us to see, and we just sort of pass by it on the way to the actual scene that we're going to get, which is Rusty confronting Danny. But in transition, we sort of follow all these little pieces of them assembling the actual vault at a level of detail, which means there's no way this is just for practice. It's also so that they can conduct the heist and film it later. But it's planted in this sort of seemingly innocuous way where like later on you're like, oh, they did show us that. Oh, that's so cool, right? Like really cool planning from Steven Soderbergh there.
It's great. Plant and payoff in terms of something that we know that is what these guys would be thinking about, and we don't need to see that. Like, maybe they thought about it before, maybe they thought about it after, maybe they just realized it now. That's not as important as it's just going to be a thing that happens in the movie later.
Exactly. As long as it was in the movie in a way that you kind of thought about it, but not long enough to realize anything, then it sort of does its job. And like, it's so economical. Like Soderbergh, that movie definitely seems whimsical. It's really not. It is carefully, like every single frame is planned by Soderbergh. It's really impressive as a directing outing for economy more than anything else.
Yes.
Okay, so the last biggest, actually, I'm sorry, I have two more things. The next biggest thing, and this is more of a screenwriting thing, but I think it's like really fascinating, is the Ocean's 11 designs characters to prevent us from thinking about logic problems and to ellipse time in the movie. So the biggest and most obvious example of this is Virgil and Turk Malloy, who were played by Casey Affleck and Scott Caan's characters. They don't have a story. They just have a bit. And their bit is anytime they go anywhere, they get in a fight. Right? And it's hilarious and it's immature and it's great. And the
Mormons.
Yeah.
And they're also Mormons.
Right. We meet, like, we have one scene that's like at all character based about them, and it's like that truck race where one of them's driving a real truck and the other one's driving like a tiny little miniature version of the truck.
Intro,
and it's great. Yeah. It's a great intro, and that's all we ever need to know about those guys for like the rest of the trilogy, frankly. You know? So, but functionally, and people aren't going to think about this, but functionally what they do is they're decoys, right? And that's what they do, of course, in the heist. Like, they show up, they argue, and they draw all the attention to themselves, while the other sneaky thing happens while other people aren't watching, right? They do that a bunch of times. But they also do that to the audience. They also are decoys to the audience so that we don't think about how impossible what they're trying to do actually is. So the best example, of course, is the pinch, which I just mentioned to you. Instead of watching the heist, how do they fix the problem with, why didn't we go in there with the heist? It's more Virgil and Turk. Like, those guys make us laugh enough.
It's a distraction.
It's a distraction.
They play 20 questions.
Yes.
Where they go like,
yes.
All right, are you a man? Yes. Are you still alive? Yes. Evil Knievel. Yeah. God damn it. Like, because they both love Evil Knievel, so it's just a joke.
Yeah, that's such a great. I'm so glad that you remembered that line too, because it's such a stupid joke. But like,
it doesn't matter.
Nobody ever came out of that theater and said, "Why didn't we watch the pinch get heisted?" Like, nobody ever asked that, and it's because
they were enjoying themselves.
Because those two guys are so funny. Also, those only one of those guys has ever been an Academy Award winner, and he's the only Academy Award winner in the movie. Oh, no, he's not. Aaron Brockovich won an Academy Award. So Julia Roberts has one. I was going to say Casey Affleck is the only Academy Award winning actor in that movie, but it's not, which would have been crazy.
It's not entirely true.
No, Julia Roberts won one also.
Soderbergh also won.
But he's a director. Yeah. Okay, I just I was like ready.
It's like it feels weird. It feels weird that he's just like such a supporting role.
Well, he's like cinema's little brother. You know what I mean? Like he's like Hollywood's little brother.
But it's actually perfect role for him because like I don't know, like I thought he was pretty good in like the assassination of Jesse James by the coward.
Love
Ford.
that movie. Love it.
And he's really good and like pitiful and like terrifying in his own way
and creepy. Yeah, he's got a real creep vibe.
And it's like that's kind of what clearly he can act. This is just like he's playing a member of like the Jackass crew. And it's kind of how we enjoyed him to like the beginning of his career. He kind of slid into people's hearts by going like, I'm just a dum-dum.
Well, he was also the funny one in Good Will Hunting. And basically everybody but the redheaded guy in that movie got famous. So yeah. Okay, so other characters that are designed to help us solve logic problems or ellipse time. Basher, Don Cheadle's character. So he has that terrible Cockney accent, right? Which is like, that in itself is kind of a wink. You know, like, hey, everybody, look at this stupid accent he's doing. So when he introduces the concept of the pinch, which I can't emphasize enough is insane and stupid, he introduces it by this like long monologue of unintelligible Cockney slang, right? And like nobody understands what he's saying, and they even have a joke about it where somebody goes, do you understand any of this? Yeah, I'll explain later, right? Those are the actual lines of the movie. So
it's like, we're in Bonnie, and then he's like, Barney.
Right, Bonnie Rubble.
Like, Bonnie Rubble, trouble.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, so you're rhyming a thing that I don't know.
Right.
In order for me to understand. So I'm not British? Is that the problem?
Like, it's like, how does anybody understand that? That isn't really
take
a thing.
a fucking hint, Cheadle.
For sure. So just so everybody understands, though, it's all a sleight of hand because he comes in with this unintelligible Cockney accent. They all say, bro, we can't understand you, which is exactly what the audience is saying, which allows him to then slowly explain to us exactly how we need this heist to go and what's going to happen for the movie plot so that we don't need to watch the heist. Like, he literally exposits exactly what needs to happen because we want him to, because he has that stupid Cockney accent. Right? And it's a fake problem that was set up by the movie to get away with this horrible exposition dump that nobody's bummed about because we want him to do it by the time that he does it for us. Right? It's like genius in a stupid way. You know?
Yeah.
Because you never want somebody to have to explain how the plot works, and yet they found this great mechanism to do it. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Put it in the mouths of buffoons. Yeah.
Well, and also make us want the exposition so bad that when we get it, we think it's good. You know?
Right, yeah.
So also, and this is like dumb and one of the schlocky things about the movie, but it's fine. Danny Ocean and Rusty Ryan's mind meld thing where like they have constant conversations where they already know what the other one's thinking. So it's
Jesus. It's so
it's cute.
Operatic.
Yeah, it's cute.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I don't hate it. It's fine. We accept it, but it gives us it accomplishes more things than just being cute. One thing is it's literally just economical. You never have to have a scene where they argue about whether they need one more guy or whether this heist is doable or any of that stuff because their brains are melded, so we don't need any of those scenes, which would be in most heist movies. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is it implies these guys are so smart. They're so much better than the average heist guy. They don't even have to talk about the details of the heist. So we can trust them to just do their thing. They know.
Grease man. Got it. Know what that means.
Yeah, they don't even have... Why should we know? Why should we, the audience, have to know? They know what they're doing. We'll
in
just
the
hang
sequels,
out.
they have that too. They have like, don't we need a looky-loo and stuff like that? And we're like, ooh, yeah. I'm getting slang.
Yeah, don't we need
about how heists work?
And they're all weird 50s slangs. Don't we need an Ethel Mertz with a banana peel? Like, I guess so, you know? Yeah.
We forgot the banana peel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Versus like a Thomas Crown Affair where it's like, I'm going to get in there and steal the painting.
Right. Thomas Crown Affair is like meticulously slow about a lot of its stealing stuff.
It's really charmless and formal. This is like let's get all the dummies, and by dummies I mean just like a motley crew that comes in and just has their own strengths. You know, like I love that Casey Affleck. I like that the Mormons. They you're right. They serve as just like, well, at any time they can turn into idiots and cause a scene, but they're also very technically proficient.
Right.
So they like kind of like a twofer, you know?
They're competent when they need to be competent, and when they need to just be jokers, they're jokers.
It's kind of the equivalent of in a heist movie where you're just moving around parts and playing essentially plot Tetris or information Tetris.
Exactly.
They're just like a piece that can meld things together. They're like a glue that just like at any time can activate. And when you think about them, there's an efficiency of that.
It's like they're so good and smart at their job that the audience doesn't need to understand their job. That's the claim of the movie. It's like, these guys are so good, like, just watch them work. Like, you don't need to know what they're gonna do. Don't worry. Like, they're just really good. And it's like, sure. I guess so. And like, that is a very different tactic than most heist movies where we really do need to know to buy in. Ocean's 11's like, no, you don't. These guys are really smart, you know. And I would just argue that Steven Soderbergh understands how much this is a wink at the audience, because he uses these key moments with each actor to like just be like, isn't this fun? Don't worry about like whether it all makes sense. Most notably, Rusty the doctor, right? When he walks in with that really bad mask and glasses and goes, does somebody need a doctor? And it's not even...
the wig? Yeah,
oh my God.
Like, this man's dead or whatever.
Right. That was in the trailers, by the way, for this movie. It's so dumb, but also it's the filmmaker being like, look, see, isn't this fun? Isn't this great? Mm-hmm. Don't worry. You know, like, don't think about it. Just go along for the ride. You'll have a great time. And he's right. He's right. Yeah. You're not mad about, does somebody need a doctor? Because in a normal movie, you'd be like, that is outrageous. But like in this movie, you're like, Brad Pitt, aren't you the best? You know?
Well, it's like, yeah, it's the same kind of reason. It's ridiculousness where it's not necessary for the sake of ridiculousness in a moment that isn't necessary. Like, I hate this phrase, but it is what it is kind of thing.
Yes, it is what it is.
It's an Ouroboros that swallows its own tail. And by that, I mean, it's like, why did they choose to have him eating in the scenes? Well, it's just to make him look more confident. Well, why is he confident? I don't know.
Because he's,
it's whatever. Like it falls apart. It's just because he's confident.
I would argue that
we're gonna do that.
I would argue that Ocean's 11 steps right over the chasm of like, these guys are basically playing themselves and you're basically thinking of them as the actors playing them. Like, it steps right up to the abyss there and doesn't go in, whereas Ocean's 12 absolutely does go into that abyss.
It even has a bit where Julia Roberts plays Julia Roberts.
Right, exactly. And I think that's because Ocean's 11 is sort of winking at you, being like, does somebody need a doctor, right?
Did you see all the people we got in this movie?
Exactly. Can you believe it? All of them. We got everybody in this movie.
Carl Reiner's in this. You know, like,
yeah, exactly.
Andy Garcia's in this.
Andy Garcia is really good in it, in like a very subtle way. So, although, just like secret side note, why the hell is Terry Benedict so opposed to kissing Julia Roberts? Like, what the hell is his problem?
I have a big problem with his character in general. Yeah, I agree with that, because they're like in the music. They're buying art, and he's like don't kiss me.
Somebody's always watching. So
someone's always watching, and it's just like, I get that they pay off with it, where when she overhears him make money decision over her love,
right?
Like, she can then say the line like, someone's always watching. But he also does. It's perhaps the most cringeworthy monologue of all time. When I watched it, I noticed it more, but I've always never liked it.
Okay.
Which is, once the heist occurs, he's on the phone with Rusty, who's like, I'm the man who's robbing you right now. And like, they're playing. He has this whole monologue where he's like, do one thing for me.
Run and hide.
Run and hide.
And
it's so awkward.
Yeah.
Because like, he's like, so I implore you, I ask you, run and hide. Because I'm like, basically, I'm going to find you and kill you. It's just like, it's posturing for machismo, you know. But ultimately, if you rewatch that, there's no one is going to support that monologue. That monologue sucks.
I would argue.
And Andy Garcia is a very solid actor, but it's just like, why do we have that? Like, it's just to make him more of a piece of shit. Like, that's just to reinforce that. It's like, in the moment where we're robbing someone, we're like, yeah, fuck this guy a little bit.
He's like the only person who doesn't smile in the movie. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, everyone else is having a great time, and Terry Benedict, the richest man in the Las Vegas universe, is just a cold, needlessly callous son of a bitch.
And I think that's why he doesn't kiss her. It's just, we need an excuse to, like, you're not gonna kiss Julia Roberts.
Right, exactly. You're not gonna kiss her. Come on,
you to kiss her,
and you get mad at him.
She like loves you. What the fuck is your problem?
Yeah, just what an asshole. Like you kiss Julia Roberts if she asks you to. That's the rules. Yeah. So okay, that does bring me to my last like sort of point, which is this is a movie that chooses to use jokes instead of tension. And that's another way that they kind of mask plot holes. Now, we talked about the pinch a lot, so I'm not going to mention that again. But it's unusual for a movie to use, like, anytime that there would normally be a tension beat, they use a joke. And that's like, even when they're executing the heist, that's the same thing. For instance, there's that moment where the grease man gets his hand stuck in the door because of the cast, right? And so, like, it gets...
He could blow up.
Yeah, exactly. He could blow up. And so, like, timer clicks down. Oh, my God, they're going to blow him up. And where does it land? Did you check the batteries? Ah, man, I didn't check the batteries, right?
It's not working.
Yeah, it's not working. So instead of plausibility, we go for a joke. And that happens time and time again, right? So it happens with, like, Frank a bunch of times, who's played by Bernie Mac. When they capture the IT guy's badge by a stripper... who's dressed as a nurse. Like, that would normally be a whole sequence in a heist movie. Instead, it just happens. The entire introduction of Terry Benedict happens in, like, a montage, which happens in sort of a it's not as funny, but it's a little bit more like, it sort of just paints over the whole man in broad strokes and doesn't lay down tension. Like, you never get the scene where he beats a guy to death. It just sort of explains it to him, and then, like, because it's...
And then later you get, he's a machine.
Right, exactly.
Montage, where it's like, Linus, after he's observed him, is like, this is what he does at this time, this is what he does, like, at this time, and he always does it. It's like, we don't need to have... It's weird that in Benedict's case, we, like, hide...
Yeah.
Like, we understand who he is and what he represents in the heist, and then we get to know him halfway through the movie.
Like, I would argue he only has a few character beats, and they're mostly with Tess. Like, for the rest of the movie, he's just sort of like antagonist looking at these guys, and does he know? Does he not know? And, like, that's really
It's mostly to get the love triangle.
Yes, which doesn't really work. I would argue that piece is the worst piece of the movie. Because I think the writing for Tess and Danny is bad. That part I think doesn't work in this movie.
I wanted to just backpedal to I just wanted to throw in a piece of information that I thought was weird after rewatching it. Is you mentioned the time where Yen gets his hands stuck and the bomb using humor instead of building the tension, which is like a normal thing. It's also, I also want to say that the reason that there's tension is because I forget what his fucking name is, but the guy who's like the nerdy IT guy.
Yeah, Livingston.
Livingston, who's basically commanding the ship from the comm.
Yes.
Saying like, okay, you're go, Danny. Okay, you're go. And stuff like that. He's doing that role, and then he's like, he stops and he goes like, all right, hold on. Yen hasn't moved because he can see inside the vault.
Right.
And he's like, don't move, don't press the button. And then someone so they didn't need a device, or they needed a device in order to make the joke work, which was unnecessary.
Right.
So it's like, once again, we have the snake eating its own tail in terms of like, why are we watching this? Because they're artificially creating a red herring in order to artificially create a red herring, because like they have to explain it away by creating this thing of, the EMP, the pinch, must have knocked out their headphone or their headset, so you can't hear me right now. But because if you don't have that, then he just goes, don't press the
Don't
button.
do
He goes,
it.
oh, okay.
Right, which is weird because it still intercepts all those 911 calls. Like, it's a very selective EMP.
It's very selective.
Yeah, I mean, and of course you don't think about it because we're too busy worried about whether the guy's going to get blown up by these weird crystal bombs they made. You know, like
Right.
another thing that's sort of masked by motion and things going too fast for us to think about, and really the scope of this heist is so big that we could never do the movie as though it was a thriller. Like, you just couldn't.
Because then Benedict Arnold, who at one point has a point with Carl Reiner, where he's like, I can see in this crystal briefcase the briefcase with the crystals in it, none of this is like dangerous, even though it absolutely is.
Right. Why does, like, they don't ask what those crystals are? That was weird to me. Like,
They don't test it.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
Yeah, like he just takes a little wand and
blitzkrieg right past it. It's fine.
Yeah. He's doing a weird heart attack thing and he's playing a Russian, so no problem. Last little thing. So lots and lots of movies do this, but nobody has ever done it the way Ocean's 11 does it. This movie uses what I would call monologues, by which I mean either a monologue or a dialogue that explains everything you're watching, and then you're just watching most of the heist and prep happen in a montage format while somebody discusses it with somebody else. Normally the worst way to do exposition. In this movie, it's playful and fun, and one of the ways they do make that work is you'll see the beginning of the conversation, and then you'll watch all the events they're describing, and then they finish the conversation impossibly at the very end of the events in a different place, right? So, like, this happens with the Terry Benedict intro, where the beginning of the description happens in a hotel. It ends with them watching him walk downstairs at a different casino. When they recruit Livingston Dell, they start by describing him, and the end of the conversation, they're actually watching him getting tangled up with a dog leash. The explanation of the hostage $80 million happens toward the end of the film. It's the same thing. So
it fucks with the chronology using a monologue to branch the details.
Yes, it's a thing that's in a lot of thrillers, right, where like a conversation starts a place and they cut and the conversation continues in the new scene. But Ocean's 11 is almost entirely made of that. Like, a good percentage of the movie is that.
It's also a tactic often used for flashbacks.
Yes.
Because someone say, like, but that's the thing. All the details, like Knives Out, I just recently watched, and it's like there's a section where it then kind of Rashomon's it, and Rashomon is a term that I'm using to show like one narrative shown from multiple points of view of different people. That it's like, in their mind they saw that detail and that detail, but in their mind so we go back to like the source footage, and then we just cut out a little later or something like that. But we wouldn't notice what we're supposed to notice unless you had them, Daniel Craig telling us. But then right after you left, this actually kept happening.
Right.
And so we know to look for it. In this, it's more of like, I'm not even like trying to flash back or do anything where I'm trying to give you information you've already seen. I'm not showing you the thing that you've already seen, and I'm just showing you as the events as they are. But by the end of the monologue, it's happened already.
Right, and that's not like a crime or anything, but it is impossible, and it's a thing that we've sort of accepted in movies, but Ocean's 11 does it so much more than most movies, and I would argue that's a real feather in the cap for Soderbergh, like how thriftily he's able to do exposition in a way that feels like that was actually fun. That's amazing. Like, legit amazing. I mean, all these tactics that he uses are amazing because Ocean's 11 should be a very bad movie, and it's not. It's a very good movie. Pretty remarkable. And so the last thing I wanted to say about this, which I think I've said 8 times in this podcast, is that I think Ocean's 11 is also proof that other movies that have come in its wake need to learn how to be more efficient. The two that sort of like pop in my brain is the first one is Inception, which spends an hour monologuing through the premise, basically, like trying to explain all the concepts of the premise so that they can do a heist. That's the first, and like it's so long and it's never abbreviated in the same way. That's the first movie, and the second one is The Irishman, which has, which just sort of refuses to do anything in a montage. Even one scene where it has a montage, it's like Joe Pesci explaining to De Niro's character like what's going to happen on this heist he goes on, and he just says a single sentence, and we watch each thing that he describes happen. You're going to go on a plane. He's on a plane. Or you're going to go talk to a guy. You talk to a guy. He's going to have a truck. You see the truck. It's like, dude, that's the opposite of how you do these fucking montages, man.
It's a montage inside a flashback,
right?
Which is
it's like, dude,
kind of hilarious.
Let Soderbergh like learn a thing from Soderbergh. I understand he's Martin Scorsese, and I did like the movie, but like
it adds elements of style.
Sure, but like again, Ocean's 11 should be 4 hours with the amount of content that's in it, and it's a nice zippy 2. You know, whereas Irishman should be 2, and it's not zippy 3.5 for exactly the same reasons. You know,
sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
I mean, I
did not like the Irishman.
I actually I did like a lot of it. I didn't like all of it, but I think it's a really good sort of counterpoint because Irishman has a big story to tell that's sort of too big to really be in a movie, and Ocean's 11 is a movie that shows us how that can be done playfully and fun, and The Irishman doesn't use any of these tactics. Instead, just like, no, we'll just let it all go in real time. And it's like, yeah, don't, though. You know what I mean? Like, we could do this shorter. And, like, that doesn't make it worse, you know?
Right. Yeah, that's the tactics that it employs. And I bet it's got even more. I was trying to think of just how music seams together things that ought not be seamed together, or it, like, forces it to work. Because you have the music kind of propelling you forward. And it's not music that it has it's not score. It's never score because it doesn't score. I think something unique to score is that inside it has movement. So it might have like, all right, I'm going to underscore this with like the tension building up. And then there's an attack, or like then the killer walks out and starts stabbing someone, and then the music changes. This is just like tracks that he puts on to give you the vibe of like, this is the easy going. Okay, this is now they're in control, and it's almost always the same note. It's just done with different instruments.
Like just for like comedic effect, imagine if you Ocean's 11'd like any of the Star Wars movies. Like Return of the Jedi is one that really comes to mind. But like imagine you Ocean 11'd Return of the Jedi. That movie is like 35 minutes max. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because like the entire Endor sequence is like explained between Lando and Han while they're getting on board their ships, and ends with them celebrating in a forest moon someplace, and that's it.
Well,
I
agree. I do think that you accidentally stumbled on the greatest scene in history, which would be Wicket, the Ewok, like over his dead body of his friend, and the music is
yeah. I'm just trying to make movies better. That's all I want, Right.
It's just like and his friend's dead. He's like,
instead of the saddest scene in all of Star Wars, we get instead a kind of whimsical glance at the occasionally painful decisions they make.
It's like when your friends die, it's like jazz. It's I get what you're saying,
but like, again, Star Wars is essentially in the same category as Ocean's 11, and by that I mean a winter blockbuster movie, because that's what Ocean's 11 was.
Sure.
And like, can you imagine if they use the same tactics for like Rise of Skywalkers or like any of these movies, right? Where it's just like, and then I don't want to spoil Rise of Skywalkers, but like, we just walk through any of these movies and ellipse the entire plot of them between a conversation between Palpatine and Rey or whatever.
Yeah. I haven't seen it, so I can just randomly say stuff, but I just like the idea that Palpatine is just like, and that's when I decided to create a Star Wars first.
And then you cut to a weird planet and you have Elvis Presley singing it like as an intro to Coruscant.
It's just like Jar Jar stabbing his fucking stupid ass tongue in a pod racer engine and going like, and then camera pans over and Palpatine's just nodding,
right?
Like he saw it all, and this is the guy.
Yeah, that's right. Because if it was Ocean's 11, it would be Palpatine.
It's a big heist.
Palpatine would be the main character. That's totally right.
Yeah, he would be he would be the Danny Ocean because he would be setting in motion a Senate heist.
Holy shit, that's such a cool movie. It's like Palpatine and Vader, right? And it's like them discussing what they did and what they're gonna do before they murder the fucking Jedi or whatever, And it's like, you think we need to kill the Jedi? You think we need to kill the Jedi? Let's kill the Jedi.
We gotta kill the Jedi. Yeah. It's like,
yeah.
It's just always the scene where it's like Wicket once again going like, just camera pans over. Palpatine's just sitting there going like, yes.
It always ends with Palpatine on another planet finishing a monologue.
Just listening.
That sounds so good.
Everything's going to
There's
plan.
a lot of shots of Palpatine going up escalators, and we drop it off, and Vader's looking at him sort of mournfully. What a great movie we've invented here.
Yeah, he like falls down in Return of the Jedi, where he like he falls down and he's like lightning is being fired from his hands.
Right.
And then he's paid a bunch of guys to have just at the bottom, just to have like a parachute,
of course,
or like a little like a landing pad. And then they pull him off quickly. He has to do a costume change. It's perfect.
Yeah, he like lands on actual balloons, and then we zoom into the balloons and focus rack to him on his weird clone island. And
then Julia Roberts walks up and goes, "Kiss me, Sheev." And he goes, "No."
Funny, I never got a check, she says to him. Yeah, well, that's a great movie. Clearly, you and I should have written it, and we shouldn't have released it to the public before we spec'd it.
So the verdict is, yes, it's unholy spells. That's what makes Ocean's 11 work, right? That's what you're saying?
Wow, you really heisted this podcast, honestly, by finding a way to tie that point in. I cannot believe you did that.
Yeah, it was all a plan from the beginning, my man. You just didn't know it yet.
That wizard joke was the air freshener of this podcast, so we just zoomed out.
Yeah.
Wow.
So here's the thing, because there's a bunch of other plot holes that kind of feed into your theory, which I love. Like, how did Ocean and his team get the fake money or the strip club flyers into the vault was one thing I noticed. Like, if there was just three guys, none of them had like bags.
Yeah, how did that work?
Were they already in the vault? And why are stripper like pamphlets in the vault? That's what you call them, right? Stripper pamphlets. That's flyers. Yeah. And then the other one is like, why wouldn't Benedict? He just is totally fine with. There's three guys in the safe, and SWAT took him away. Knowing what we know about his he's got a major boner for like personal justice and like seeing his thief and looking this thief in the face. Why wouldn't he go like, okay, take me to them? Like, I want to see who the three men who were robbing me are, right?
Yeah, is the premise that
But instead he just kind of like, let's go to the vault and like figure it out. He doesn't mention what, like he just doesn't care about what happened to the three guys in the safe.
Well, I think that,
and they just tell him they've been arrested.
Oh, right.
And then SWAT team members come out. He never actually meets the SWAT team members. Like, who actually met the SWAT team?
Right.
Like, they just appear.
That's true. He does. I mean,
there's so many plot holes.
Yeah, he would want to see who did it. That's totally right.
There's a bunch of stuff like that. I'm gonna. I don't even know what do we fucking call it in this show. What's our format?
This is your film school feedback.
This is my film school feedback. I agree with most of what you're saying, and it's intact. Your theory is absolutely intact.
What took me out of it, though?
Does,
right?
Yeah, that's a film school in joke for you. Everybody who went to film school. It took me out of it.
It really took me out of it.
No, it totally works, and that's why we enjoy movies sometimes. I do think that it's dangerously close to something that I think is ruining, specifically TV. Which is the mystery box idea, right? It's dangerously close to the mystery box because the second that you start creating red herrings for the sake of creating new red herrings, like if I'm writing in stuff like, well, why don't the batteries work? Or why doesn't his like that's a funny joke, and I'm glad we got that joke. That was a fun little bit. But in order for me to even get the tension and therefore for the joke to work, we have to have the whole thing with his Yen's hand in the vault. And if Danny and Linus's headsets don't work because of the pinch, taking out their electronics, I guess, but sometimes it works for other people. Those types of plot holes that are like plot holes don't bother me if they're just like, yeah, don't think about it because it doesn't really matter.
Sure.
It doesn't often ruin the story, but stuff like that, it's just like you're just creating straw men for the sake of straw men.
Right.
And then just for the sake of enjoyment. Now, this is a charming movie, so I give it a bigger pass than I give something like, I don't know, The Watchmen.
Right, which
or like,
this movie is definitely counting on, by the way. It's like, we are charming.
But like the TV... Yeah, but when you do stuff where you're just creating mysteries for the sake of getting to the next mystery and then never explaining the previous mystery is like a byproduct of that. It just feels like you're just writing whatever dumb shit comes up to your head and then working backward and essentially like just saying like, but we need to make it so that like at the end they win. And we get this feeling that they thought about it all in advance. Even the times you thought they fucked up, that was a part of the plan. It takes out any of the believability of this stuff. And then it's just like, well, okay, like what's the difference between Ocean's 11 and, a piece of trash like the Now You Can't See Me or Now You Can See Me, that series? That's the actual literal magicians.
You are really pressing on the magician button today. I love it.
Well, that just happens to be true. But yeah, let's think about this. Like that is a absolute piece of crap because it's trying to do the same thing as Ocean's 11. It's like, what if they're actually mages? But it doesn't have any of the charm that Ocean's 11 has because the characters and the actors portraying them are not
George Clooney.
Job.
Yeah.
So it only gets a pass, this movie, because I enjoy watching Brad Pitt eat a banana. Right,
or ice cream or nachos.
I enjoy Julia Roberts like throwing water into George Clooney's face. Or whatever it may be. It makes me feel like I'm like, ooh, these people again. And then Soderbergh does it so masterfully that I don't think about it, but it's basically the proto version of the mystery box a la J.J. Abrams and Damon Lindelof.
Yes. I understand.
And it really bothers me.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ocean's 11 is a movie that it was bad for movies in some ways that it was so good. Because it's using a lot of tools that usually produce bad movies and instead produced a very good movie.
That's why the sequels, they also fell flat.
Yes.
Not because they weren't doing the same thing and it wasn't working and it wasn't the same cast. In fact, they add like Catherine Zeta-Jones to the mix and Albert Finney to the mix. They just keep ramping it up. But because they're itemizing the same thing, it doesn't feel like we caught a lightning bolt. It feels like, okay, so you're just doing it again.
It feels
which I know is
like they made a formula and then followed it.
Yeah, and I understand that that's kind of by nature how sequels work. I'm not arguing against sequels in general, but I am just saying like it is one of those magical things that kind of only works on you once, or at least it does for me.
I agree.
Now, this doesn't throw anything in the face of what you're arguing, because what you're arguing is you're itemizing how does he accomplish it, which I think is, the efficiency note and all that stuff I think is very well said. I just think that if we follow these rules to a T, that doesn't make a good screenwriter. It's on par with a good idea, like a good hook for a movie, which is if he was to pitch this movie and he wasn't anybody, like Soderbergh wasn't anybody, or and he wasn't casting like the cast that he got. It was just like out of film school trying to pitch a movie. The best thing he's got is imagine a heist movie where at the end of the heist movie, they've narrated everything and you realize that everything that went bad actually was going to plan.
Yeah, I mean, right.
Which is kind of part and parcel of most heist movies.
It is.
For a lot, like The Sting and stuff like that, there's a lot of movies that kind of have that vibe. This one goes whole hog in that direction, which is a good idea for a movie. But it doesn't succeed. It doesn't cause its success. In other words, your theory doesn't cause its success entirely.
Oh, so you're saying that though I identified things that are true about Ocean's 11, that I have not identified the causal agent?
I would say that you're identifying a causal agent, which is the smoke and mirrors of filmmaking. I would argue that the biggest smoke and mirrors is the music, the actors portraying the characters, and just the overall direction of making a heist movie that is just constant montage.
And yet, right. So, but I feel like what you're saying is that that this is a movie where all that stuff works, even though most of the time it doesn't, right? Because most of the time those things don't work.
And like I said, I enjoyed the movie when I first saw it, and sometimes I watch it too. And I just put it on and I don't think about it, because it's one of those movies where you just don't think about it.
It forces you to be that.
It casts that spell on you.
Okay. I do have I do have one last cracked observation to make.
Okay.
So there's a moment where they basically have a van that can be driven by a robot that has a camera head and arms and is being operated by Casey Affleck. And that robot is worth much more money than they stole in the entire
like the
heist.
RC car.
Yeah.
Right, which is planted by, at the beginning, he does a little one. He just does a big one.
It's like, I mean, so right, they did
like he has the monster truck and then he has the van.
They did justify it, but it's also like, wait, so this guy can program, like, in his free time, basically, a functional driver that he can operate with a remote, and they're stealing $100 million. Like, he just made $100 million. You
just sell that.
Just
idea.
sell the robot for $100 million. Can we just do that? Like, it just seems seems a little short-sighted.
I mean, I still like the heist idea, but he should be independently wealthy.
Right, it's like
at the beginning of this movie, therefore have no incentive to be on the heist.
Casey Affleck is the equivalent of Bruce Wayne in this movie, in that Bruce Wayne would be a much more effective crime fighter if he just donated money instead of fighting. And I think Casey Affleck would be a much more effective thief if he just invented things and didn't thief at all. You know what I mean? It's crazy how smart he is. At the beginning of the second movie, he's also...
The Afflecks truly are a scourge on the universe.
In the beginning of the second movie, he's about to get married to a woman who super ends up not mattering at all in this trilogy. But it's a little bit like...
that poor woman.
Yeah, it's a little bit like... So, like, this guy is like a mega star talent-wise. Like, this guy's a mega talent as a human being. And I don't mean Casey Affleck. I mean the character that he's playing is a mega talent.
Yeah.
And, like, nobody ever takes him aside. Like, his brother doesn't care about him enough to be like, yo, dude, why are you a thief? Straight up. Like, you can get women when you need to. You can invent robots that are straight up sorcery. Like, just sell a robot and retire. What are you doing? But nobody says that to him.
No one says it to him. Oh, what a loss.
I love it when you don't believe what you say. That's like my favorite thing.
What do you mean? I believe we live in the Ocean's 11 world. Don't you know this?
I love that.
Well, I like this.
Me too.
This is a good argument. I'm going to bring this to other movies now. I'm going to think about how unholy spells and incantations involving ghouls are really, truly how movies work.
Thank you for taking the correct lesson from this hour podcast. Yeah.
No, that was well done, sir.
Thank you.
Well
I appreciate it.
Round of applause. Nope, we didn't get an applause. We didn't get an applause machine. We didn't get a group of fans.
No,
on the
didn't even add
so
it in post, I guess. So yeah. What are you gonna do?
I really fucked up that heist. I'm also gonna start calling just like normal things heists.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna go do a lunch heist, which just means gonna make a sandwich.
But I'm gonna do it sneakily.
Yeah, and
complicated.
But you didn't think I put the fucking mustard on first, but I did. That kind of shit. Yeah.
So you're putting a mustard on nothing first? That is a lunch heist, right there.
Wouldn't you like to know? watch the movie and you'll get it all.
Oh shit!
You'll get all the information.
That's some hype right there.
That's a mystery box right there, baby.
What will Abe be putting mustard on? Nothing? Question mark. Voters and listeners, weigh in. Weigh in on what he's putting on mustard.
I'm wily. Anything else you want to say? Anything else we doing here? Or are we done?
I think that's it for this installment of Directorpiece.
So next episode is me. So we've done 2 episodes so far, and I won mine, and you won yours via me. so next round will be me. Pitching something else.
Are you keeping like a mustard scoreboard? You just having a scoreboard made of mustard in your clown apartment? Mm-hmm. I really enjoy that image.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, let's get out of here.
All right. Good job.
Good job.